Welcome to the second part of the Health and Wealth series of Coffee with Alissa. We're again joined by Dr. Dan Turro of Turro Family Chiropractic in the North Hills of Pittsburgh. Hi, Dan. How are you?
Good, Alissa. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Can you give us a quick review of the dimensions of stress from last month's video before we jump into the factors we're going to discuss?
Sure thing. So, we may have hit on, we talked about stress and whether it's good or bad. And, one of the things we're really going to dive into today are the three dimensions of stress, at least the first two, with being physical and biochemical. So when we look at, stress, our bodies are constantly being, fighting external environmental factors, right? We talked about our body's ability to adapt to an external environment. So, and I don't know if I brought this point up the last time or not, but, the idea if we just leave our finances and don't, take an active role in our finances, right? They're slowly just going to, kind of dwindle away. We're not actively investing or actively putting, money into things that are going to grow our wealth. Then, the economy and, kids and everyone is just going to constantly pull away at it, right? And kind of the same idea with our health. If we're not taking an active role battling against external environmental stressors, your body is going to get, beaten up over time. And, there is a natural degradation or degeneration that happens over life. We talked about the body's internal intelligence. We're designed to heal. We're designed to fight against those stressors. But there's three dimensions of stress that we look at, and that's the physical, the biochemical, and the relational that we're going to get into, which is, relational I kind of, put under the mental emotional side. But we're really going to dive into those three dimensions, at least the first two today, and how that, how managing those levels of stress. Okay, again, stress we talked about, is it good or bad? Well, stress is inevitable. It's really about how are you implementing the stress on a day by day intentional level in order to achieve the best level of health and well-being.
Well, great. Well, let's jump right in. We'll start with the physical effects on us. Can you help us understand the difference between micro and macro trauma and injuries?
So looking at, and so this is what I would consider from an injury level of physical stress. A healthy physical stress would be something like a weightlifting, resistance bands, or going out and doing a run, or doing some stretching exercises. Those would be healthy, intentional, exercises to help grow and strengthen our body's, ability to be healthy. But then you have, injuries, okay, which can be on a macro level. The easiest way to look at it is, car accidents, your whiplash injuries, your sports injuries, concussions. If you've ever played, the clients come in and I ask them a simple question: did you ever play sports in your past, in high school, college, or currently play sports? And even like the mom or dad, the dad hockey leagues, they're out there, bumping shoulders with each other. The soccer leagues, the parents are playing, soccer at the parents' kids' games at the end of the season. It's like, there's little bumps and falls, on a muddy field. Those are macro levels of trauma that your body can, the bumps and bruises that your body can really take. And, that goes into your body. It can go into a specific joint, it can go into the spine, and have a major impact, on your body's recovery, because your body has to heal from injury. The other thing that we're looking at is the micro traumas. These are probably much more common on a regular basis. We're doing one right now sitting. Unfortunately, and we've all heard this probably nowadays. It became popular maybe about a decade ago, but the idea that sitting to the body or sitting to the spine is like smoking to the lungs. This idea of we are beings that really are not designed to sit for long periods of time. We're really designed that we can, squat down on our haunches and, we can be working at working out on the ground or, on a small table or something, but we're designed to get into that squat position. So this idea of sitting at a chair for a long period of time, that's a micro trauma. Our head comes forward because we're trying to look at our screen, or we're looking down at our phones constantly. So those, those are micro traumas that are accumulating over time, and it's the accumulation of that stress over time. It might not impact you when you're 20 years old, 25, 30, but you get into your 30s, 40s, and beyond, those micro traumas can really start to accumulate to the point of now you have the screaming tea kettle because it's hit its boiling point.
So when we talk about like physical endeavors, risk is always a factor. So how do we assess risk properly?
Okay, so again, risk tolerance, right? This is something that you go into with your clients, I'm sure, at a very, very heavy level. But this idea of what is the activity doing? Okay, is it ultimately bringing you a level of joy or satisfaction to your life? But on the counter side of that, what is the risk in terms of long-term injury or ultimately really harming your body's ability to be healthy? So again, the old saying of the greater the risk, the greater reward. Yeah, that can be possible, but also the greater the risk, ultimately you could create long-term damage to your body and really hinder its ability, hinder your quality of life and your adaptation in the future. So one gentleman comes to mind that I work with on a regular basis. Again, in his 20s, he was the one who's out on his back of the boat, doing surfing and wakeboarding and flipping over, doing the half pipe on the on the snowboard down the hill, and just doing these crazy physical activities. But now he's in his 30s now. He's in his early 30s now, and he does have a young daughter. And he starts to recognize that, okay, he can still do some of the stuff, which is just absolutely incredible. But, he also recognizes that if he takes a spill, the risk of spilling and hurting and long-term injury may not necessarily outweigh the benefit and the joy and freedom that doing that activity, is worth it for the long run anymore. So I think that assessment of risk, I think it changes significantly as we, age decade to decade. So it's something that, again, we talked about last time, communication with our healthcare team, with your wealth care team. This idea of assessing that risk regularly. As a chiropractor, I am not someone, I need these hands. So I'm not someone that's going to go out there and, engage in like a backyard football game, because if as much as I might like to, bump some kids and adults around and just have a good time, it's one slip the wrong way and, broken wrist, and I'm down for 6 months or 6 weeks. That's a massive impact on, my family's, my family's, health and well-being because of the income disparity. So, sacrificing for, again, we talked about the instant gratification last time, sacrificing that immediate, instant gratification for long-term, ability to, be healthy, I think is very important, and something that we don't take into account as often as we should as a society or as individuals.
And something that you mentioned in the first discussion that we had was about aging, and you talked a little bit about accelerated versus graceful aging. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Absolutely. So, as I said last time we spoke, this idea of living healthfully to 100 years old, I truly believe that we're designed that we could all live well into our 90s and beyond, and lead a very, very quality of life. I have a podcast that I do, and one of the podcasts that I did with my sister, we talked about centenarians. There's these things called blue zones, and these are areas across the world, these concentrated areas of communities across the world that have the highest percentage of centenarians, people who live to 100. And then they looked across the board of what did these blue zones, these cultures have in common, and they were able to pinpoint 9 qualities across these communities that were very, very similar. And so this idea that we have, especially in the United States, that, oh, I don't want to live to 100 because our vision of 100 is we're going to be in a nursing home, the last 10, 15 years of our life. And I would agree with that. If that's the vision that we have, I don't want to live that vision. I want to live as long as I can for as healthfully and quality of life. Now, is my life going to be the same physically and what I can do the same at 90 as it is 30? No, but understanding that, if we look at a map, and if this line is health and if this line is optimal health and this line is death, ultimately we want to live that all the way across, and then quick decline and just die off in our sleep. That's the ideal vision of life. Live a life very, very quality, very fulfilled, and then we're going to pass away in our sleep. But unfortunately, most people don't live like that, especially in the United States. We're on this, slow, steady decline, so we get to that, age 60, and it's like, we're really, really hurting in terms of our quality of life. And much of that can be traced back to accidents, injuries, this idea of physical macro stresses that accumulated throughout our early life, from the time that we're, 10, 20, 30 years old. And so this idea of, are we on a graceful aging path, or are we on an accelerated aging path? And that's a lot of what we discuss in the office, because again, it's our lifestyle and the accumulation of stressors that we can identify now and help correct before you ever get to that accelerated path of aging. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And I appreciate you sharing all of that with us. And I know we're going to jump here into the biochemical side of our bodies, but can you give us 3 quick takeaways for our physical health?
So what do we do about it, right?
Yes.
So what do we do? How do we avoid getting on that accelerated aging path? So making adjustments, and we went back to the previous talk where we talked about assessment. Okay, adjustments being from a chiropractic side of things, we physically adjust the body all day long, primarily the spine, because we want to make sure that it's aligned healthfully and it's moving healthfully. So a healthy functioning spine is setting you up for success in terms of a healthy functioning you. So that's where we're looking at adjustments of the spine, making sure that we're optimizing motion, flexibility, mobility of the body, specifically the spine. So adjustments being number 1. Number 2 being your activity level. Choosing activities that provide the greatest benefit, the greatest fulfillment of joy and activity with our families, our friends, our communities, but also with as minimal risk as possible. So again, can you get the same type of brain activity stimulation doing something that is a much less risk? Something like playing pickleball versus going out and playing ice hockey. So that is that activity, and making choices about activity that are going to limit your long-term injury sustaining. And then the final one is making sure that aligning with your goals, right? So if you truly want to be on that path of graceful aging, then we have to start making choices today, in our 20s and 30s. We have to make choices today that are going to impact how we live our life for the long term. And unfortunately, right, we grow up, we've got, young kids who are jumping into sports, and then they go into, the young peewee sports, and they get into the high school and college sports, and it's just constant degradation and beating up of the body at a very, very high level. And some people will make it to that elite level athletes, but as I talk about with my sister all the time, who works in my office, an elite level athlete, what they do to train, what they do to their body is not equivalent to long-term health and well-being and longevity. And so I think making sure that you are aligning with what's your long-term vision of how you want to, get healthy and stay healthy. If that's truly something you want to do, you need to make sure that you are making decisions that align with those goals.
Great. So shifting to the biochemical makeup and how that affects us, can you start by defining toxicity versus deficiency?
So those are really the two things that we have to look at when it comes to, our biochemistry. Again, it's an entire topic that we could talk. There's whole courses, right? There's biochemistry 1, 2, 3. I mean, there's entire degrees of biochemistry. So when we're looking at this really simply, anything that goes into your mouth, or anything that's breathed into the lungs, or anything that goes on your skin, has the ability to change your internal chemistry level. So our body needs a certain level of nutrients, okay, to sustain healthy function. If we're not getting enough of those healthy nutrients, again, through breathing, oxygen is a nutrient, or through ultimately our diet, that's where we get the majority of our nutrients from. If we're not taking in a sufficient number of those nutrients, then you're going to have a deficiency. Again, the body has an incredible ability to adapt. So we could have, a low, subclinical deficiency that's never diagnosed. We're in a normal range, but it's really low for us that, we could go several decades without having any impact. And then, maybe 3 decades down the road, now all of a sudden we're having some sort of, sign or symptom. Maybe we're having a headache. Maybe we're having, muscle cramping, aching, weakness, tingling and numbness, because we've had this low level of sufficiency that we're not able to recover as quickly. So deficiency is not getting enough. Toxicity is getting too much, okay? Getting too much of something that our body can't handle. So, and anything could be toxic, right? Water can be toxic if you have too much of it, right? You can drown in a pool if too much water gets in your system in the wrong area. So anything can be toxic if you get too much of it. So really it comes down to, are you getting a sufficient number of nutrients to the body tissues so that you're able to, your body's able to function as it should, which, as we talked about before, is healthfully.
Yeah, and I think something too today is we're totally bombarded by ads for supplements. And, when we decided to have a baby, obviously needed to find a good prenatal vitamin, and I did a ton of research. And the more research I did, the more I realized how much junk was actually out there being marketed as a supplement that helps develop the baby growing inside of you. So when people are shopping for these supplements, what are some important things for them to consider?
Fantastic question. And again, in my office, we really come from the idea that it truly should be a supplement, which it's in addition to a good, healthy, quality diet, which I think we're going to get to in a minute here. But when we're talking about supplementation, it should really be in addition to, and kind of more as an as-needed basis. But unfortunately, because of over-farming, much of the nutrient quality in our apples and in our fruits and vegetables, even in our meats, is significantly different today than it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago. So that's where supplementation can be beneficial. Making sure that it is a good quality organic supplement. There's very, very significant, there's a very significant process from the supplement company that comes into play that they need to have I's dotted, T's crossed in terms of their manufacturing practices to get that organic label. So that can be a very, very important thing. The other thing to look for is a lot of times if you have a trusted healthcare provider or a team of healthcare providers, many supplements you can't just get over the counter. You can get many of them, but there are certain quality of supplements that you can only get inside a healthcare practitioner's office or on their store, because they have to order it because of the quality that is out there. So looking to get that, and then of course there's a difference between what is the actual supplement made up of. Is it made up of a hard compact tablet, or is it a powder, or is it a capsule that's a powder inside of a capsule? So there's different qualities of how your body actually takes that in, ingests it, and gets it into your bloodstream to utilize it at the tissue level. So all of those are very important for looking at the quality of supplementation. So I can tell you the stuff that you're going to get at a big box store. I'm not even going to name any names, but I can almost guarantee most of that stuff you might as well just take it out of the bottle and flush it down the toilet, because they're designed to be very cheap. And if you look at a lot of those, the percentage of ingredients that is in there is very, very high. They do that because they know the utilization rate, the actual amount of whatever the nutrient is getting into your system and being utilized is going to be such a low percentage that they pack it full with binders and fillers and very high amounts of those nutrients, low quality compounds, because they're doing it fast and cheap.
Well, I think you kind of mentioned diet, but that's another hot topic today. There's so many fad diets. They're popular for a short time. They often produce results very quickly, but they aren't sustainable long term, of course. And the more I read, the more I learn, right? Most of them actually aren't healthy. You're cutting out entire food groups, or just eating a ridiculous amount of things that really aren't healthy because, I don't know, it does something to cause you to lose weight quickly. So can you talk a little bit about true diet and know what that should look like?
So again, we could spend hours on this topic. Going back to who you talk to about this, I can tell you from experience, there are very few primary care providers that have any sort of actual good founding knowledge on this topic. When you're looking at nutrition and what to eat, how to eat, your average medical doctor gets a 1-hour nutrition course in their entire medical field. So I'm not saying what medical doctors what they do in terms of significant life-saving medicine. Fantastic. But when it comes to actual nutrition and, prescribing, like you just said, what to eat, how to eat, and, very, very little understanding there unless they've gone outside their medical degree to get that. So, when you're talking once a year to your medical doctor and they tell you, oh, you need to eat healthier and lose weight. Well, again, that's pretty much the extent of their recommendation. Eat healthier and lose weight. So go ahead and type that into Google and see what type of results you get. And I think that's what it comes down to. And really, the diet can be very, very unique at times. As a civilization, as a species, human beings, really we're required to have a certain level of fats in the body, a certain level of carbohydrates, a certain level of proteins, because those are the building blocks. Those are the macro building blocks of what makes us, builds our body. So how we get those, I think, can be very, very unique. And again, if you're taking someone who is training at a very, very high level for a sports activity, that's going to be very different than your person who's just looking to play pickleball, who's in their 60s, just looking to play pickleball once or twice a week. So again, it really comes down to the alignment of your goals and what you're looking to do. But what I have seen is, you want to avoid the processed foods, right? If it comes in a box or a bag or comes from a fast food restaurant that you can go through a drive-through, not the healthiest choice. Getting a wide variety. So I think one of the easiest ways to look at it is variety and variation. Okay. Variety and cycling. Variety and variation. Variety and cycling. Changing, there's this whole concept of eating with the seasons, okay? And if you look at our ancestors, that's what they would do, right? They wouldn't be eating the same things in early spring as they would at fall and harvest. And there's a reason for that. Your body does actually change as temperatures and as seasons start to change. The circadian rhythm goes in a 24-hour cycle, but there's also more of a longer term cycle there that goes with the change of the season. So, there's books on that. If you look at cycling, eating for the seasons, but varying that diet up. If you found yourself getting stuck in a plateau, especially if you're trying to lose weight, varying that has a big impact. And not just what you eat, but when you eat. This is something that I discovered fasting probably about 5 years ago. And again, it's been in our civilization for years and years and years. But when you're eating, and we've all heard the term intermittent fasting now, but there's different types of fasting, but making sure that you are not just looking at what you're eating, but when you're eating, has a major impact on not just losing weight, but achieving, maintaining a healthy weight. So that's also just as important of a factor, and sometimes more important, than what you're eating on a day-to-day. So I know that was more of like a 30,000 foot view. And again, we could maybe do another one in the future. We have lots of information on our website, but yeah, what you're eating, not just what, but when you're eating has a major impact on your health.
That's great. So I think I can pull a couple takeaways out of this for our audience, and that was, the diet cycling and the fasting. Do you have any other takeaways? I know when we talked before, you talked about water consumption. So is that an important factor?
Absolutely. Our body is 70% water, depending on the tissue that you're actually looking at. So, if you're looking at diet, you want to look at the cycling, you want to look at when you're eating, which is the fasting, but ultimately you have got to be making sure you're getting enough water in your day. Most people are very, very dehydrated. The simplest way to make sure that you're getting enough water in your system, take your body weight, take your body weight in pounds, divide it by 2. That's the number of ounces that you should drink. So if you're a 200-pound man and you divide by 2, you should be drinking about 100 ounces of water a day, okay? Now, obviously, if you drink things like coffee, your activity level, there's a lot of things that, would obviously want you to increase or decrease that number, but at least gives you an average whereabout of the amount of water intake that you should be doing on a daily basis.
Well, Dan, thanks again for joining us. I look forward to our next conversation on the relational factors of health. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Alissa.